Hey, Bulls and Bears, what is happening? You're watching Bull Boom Bear Bust. It is Thursday, February 17th, 2022. Folks, we have to talk about evictions and late rents. Both are on the upswing. Let's talk about late rents first. Also, real quick mention here, thanks to everybody that commented in the last video where I showed what I rarely do. I showed what I was eating at a restaurant. And it's funny because I barely eat out at restaurants because of the cost. And we'll talk about that a little bit more after this eviction news. But yes, evictions, late rents on the upswing once again. In fact, we're just about where we were pre-pandemic, pre-health crisis. Of course, we saw all the rescue programs. The moratoriums came in to help people during this time. And that actually prevented things from getting much worse. But even with all the assistance that was handed out, we still saw a huge uptick in homelessness, as we reported on here over the past few years, pretty consistently. But now with the rent moratoriums ending in all but just a few places, we're seeing this uptick again in late rents. So we have to ask ourselves, where is the economic recovery that we're being told about? And just I think a week or two ago, we talked about how a recent survey showed that 70% of people are living paycheck to paycheck, about what it was pre-pandemic. So again, where is the recovery? We're seeing all these different news articles and all these different instances telling us that there is no economic recovery for most people, especially the working class, the middle class, and most of the bottom 90%. And here's some interesting stats that I pulled up for you here. Data compiled by the National Multifamily Housing Council shows that last December, only 92% of households paid their rent on time, compared to 98% pre-pandemic. That was April 2019. So when you look at this data, we're actually worse off than we were prior to the health crisis. So even after all the trillions of dollars created, all the new currency that was created, all of the assistance programs, all of the protocols, people are still worse off, and now more people than pre-pandemic are not paying their rent. So what does that tell you? Please let me know down in the comments. I fully expected this to happen because it wasn't just about the health crisis. There was big problems before the health crisis. I hope most of you know that by now. But of course, all the blame, all the woes were blamed on the health crisis and not on the big picture economic structure here. So now with only 92% of households paying their rent on time, it's only a matter of time before we're going to start seeing this play out. And I think by this summer, later 2022, you're going to start seeing big upticks in homelessness. Who knows, maybe another moratorium, maybe another rescue plan will come in. And that's going to be painful for a lot of landlords. If you own property right now, you might want to strategize a little bit on what's going to happen if you're no longer allowed to collect rents. We saw a lot of landlords ended up selling their home. Home ownership dropped after increasing initially because all the people bought homes to get out of the city and to do the work at home thing and to move to cheaper areas. Home ownership increased pretty dramatically at the beginning of the health crisis and then dropped down as many landlords wanted to no longer be landlords with this type of eviction moratoriums and just this type of uncertainty. What do you do as a property investor, as a landlord, when you don't know if there's going to be a law coming out telling people they don't have to pay you your rent? Now, the big money, the big institutions that are coming in and buying homes hand over fist. In some places, 50% of all homes in some cities are being bought by investors, including large multinational hedge funds, investment houses. They can withstand that a little bit easier, right? So if you're a multi-billion-dollar corporation and there's a rent moratorium, you're going to be able to handle that versus someone that just has two or three rental properties, the small mom and pop landlord. You might want to rethink, as a landlord, what you're going to do here when these rents continue to, the uptick in late rents are going to continue to rise. As far as I could see, I mean, what's going to change it? We're seeing the cost of living go up everywhere, prices of goods, products, energy, you name it's going up. So how are people going to start paying their rent? How is this going to improve? right? It's going to continue to get worse. I mean, most of you know that. It's pretty simple to figure out here. The cost of living, the end of the rescue programs, the drastic rise in rents that we've seen now. Rents are now eating up a bigger chunk of net income versus any time in history. Recent article here out of courts, even with pandemic aid, more U.S. renters aren't able to pay rent on time. Well, a lot of that aid is now ended. Of course, we still have certain programs, certain assistance programs that are going to continue forever, that have been in place for decades. But the ones that specifically came out for the health crisis that came out in 2020, those have, for the most part, dried up, except for a few areas. Now, out of the same article out of courts, a very, very interesting chart. Take a look here. And this is the percent of rents paid that we just talked about. We look back April 2019, it was about 98%. And now to the far right here, currently, or as of last December here, the most recent data drops down to 92%. But look at each time an economic stimulus payment was sent out. Here's one here, March 2020. The number of households paying the rent on time increased from 96 to over 97%. We see the same thing with the other checks that were sent out. Here's another one. A check was sent out in March 2021, went from 93 to almost 97% paying their rent on time. So we see that these stimulus checks, what they're being used for, they're not making people rich. In fact, they're making people, they're allowing people to maybe pay a couple months rent. And that's why we see these upticks right around the same time as the stimulus checks are sent out. Not a good picture, folks. When people have to depend on payouts just to pay their rent, this is a country on the brink of disaster. And instead of being allowed to implode, where it's very noticeable, it's happening very slowly. And who knows, maybe they'll slow it down again. Maybe they'll kick the can down the road further. More stimulus checks, more moratoriums. Please let me know down in the comments what's headed for us later this year in 2022. More of these programs? Or are we just going to just see some sort of massive increase in homelessness? Will the quote-unquote leaders allow that to happen? How is this going to play out? I mean, it's hard to predict a manipulated market or a manipulated economy. And, you know, we have this manipulation. We have these rescue programs and checks that get sent out. So unless you're a mind reader of the lawmakers, you really don't know how this is going to play out. How's about a law passed that says that multinational corporations can no longer buy up homes and then turn around and bump the rent up to the same people that they priced out of the housing market? That would be a nice law, but guess what? I don't think that's going to happen. I wish I had better news for you, but things are about ready to get a lot more expensive from a housing standpoint and just from an overall cost of living. Now, on the topic that we talked about in a previous report where I talked about an omelet plate was $16, shout out to all the people out there that are getting their own eggs. Several of you mentioned that you get your own eggs, you have your own chickens, your own hens. And it's interesting because I grew up on a small farm in Michigan, and we used to have hens and we used to get our own eggs. And it hurts to pay $16 for an omelet plate. When I remember back when eggs were just free. You go out in the backyard, you get a few eggs, you bring them in the house, and every day there was just free eggs out there. So prepare accordingly. Big love, everybody. Hope you're warm. Hope you're safe with the roof over your head. Thanks for watching. Big love. Peace.